Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and I'm so happy you're here with me. I'm going to take my glasses off because there's kind of a glare there. And I am going to share with you today some highlights from chapter 10 of Outshining Trauma by Ralph De La Rosa. But this is the first video that I am recording since I found out the news of Ralph's sudden passing. And I originally was going to make a whole tribute video to Ralph. Um, but I had a bit of a polarization in my system. There were parts of me that really felt like it was not appropriate because I did not know Ralph in person. I've never attended even any of Ralph's groups. And so it just felt like that was out of my lane, I guess. And so I do want to start just by saying that I guess apologize for a couple of things. One is that I, in my Instagram stories, I shared about my own grief process when I found out the news, um, because I wanted to, I think my calling, what I've discovered is as my calling, is really to show up in the world as an authentic person who is really listening to my parts, to my emotions, to my body's signals, my nervous system, and letting my body compass kind of guide me in an authentic way and to just show up as an example of that. So I wanted to be an example of kind of the different parts of me that arose, the shock, the indignation, the anger around why are we losing so many beloved IFS teachers, um, the deep sadness that many of my parts, the heaviness that they felt, and the parts that just wanted to figure things out. And so I felt like it was appropriate for me to share a little bit, especially because I've been devoting every YouTube video a couple times a week for months to Ralph's wonderful book. And so I wanted to make note of it. And I also included a link to Ralph's last talk, which is about endings and about death. And I had put there, uh, I put, did he know? I've since understood that it seems that Ralph preferred the pronouns they, them. And so I want to apologize for that. And I think Ralph put he, they. And so I don't think that they would be upset with me using he, but it seems like all the people who were close to Ralph and knew Ralph well used the pronouns they, them. So I definitely want to do that going forward as much as I can and just honor them in that way. But also I had put did they know, because there was this talk um about death, I believe the day before, and I just wanted to apologize that I was not trying to put any kind of speculation there. I know that some people have this premonition about, especially people who are really spiritually connected, have a premonition of when their time is. And I wasn't trying to speculate about anything at all. As far as I know, there is um, still no confirmation about cause of death, and there's no evidence of foul play or any evidence that Ralph took his own life. So I want to be really clear on that because that kind of speculation can be really harmful to people. And just want to celebrate, who Ralph was. And I know there's so many things that I don't know about Ralph. I know what they chose to uh, communicate in their book. And, I wrote a book about 10 years ago. And so I understand the experience of putting yourself into your work and sharing so much of yourself in a way that people know you. And they might know deep things about you and about your beliefs and your experiences, and yet not other little, more surface things. Um, and it's kind of like my experience also being on YouTube or showing up as a presence on and a teacher on Instagram. many people will feel like they know me quite well. And to be honest, you do, because I'm sharing so much of myself and I'm showing up quite authentically because I'm kind of here by myself and I feel very safe. Even though hundreds of people are watching my videos on the other end, because you're not here physically right now, I feel safer kind of being authentic and opening up, much more than if I was in a Zoom call with even one other person, right? My parts would feel really self-conscious and want to mask more and please that person, right? But in this way, I'm able to show up more authentically. So I'm just saying that there can be kind of this interesting dynamic where you know a lot more about me than I know about you, though you may feel seen, right, by me sharing my experiences that resonate with yours, and so that you feel like you're not alone. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic. And so I don't want to claim that I knew Ralph in any deeper way than I did. I don't want to be offensive to those who did and whose grief is more deep, more profound than mine is. But I do want to acknowledge um, Ralph's passing. I want to acknowledge that if you have any parts that come up around it, I know that Ralph, um, just like Derek, is now an ancestor. I can even be the one to you can call on if you feel is so inclined to help you through the process, but that yourself can give love and attention and allow every part, whatever it is, there's no shame. Um, Even parts that feel deep despair, confusion, shock, anger. I had a part that was just stomping around and saying, it's not fair. Why are all the IFS teachers passing? And just allowed that part to express itself until it was tired out and it was able to rest. And so I had several parts that came. Uh, and what's interesting is I was able to go out into the actual forest and sit on a log and do the exercise that I taught in a couple videos back about, bringing my inner sanctuary that is in a forested meadow in Tuolumne Meadows, but kind of bringing that to mind while I was in the forest and inviting all the parts that wanted to be seen to come in. I let the tired ones rest in a big bed. I just held the ones who were shaking and crying and was able to really tend to them. It was a beautiful, again, interrelating, like Ralph talks about so brilliantly. And yeah, so I just want to encourage you to do the same if your system is activated by this news and or take time, sometimes when there's a loss that's not as close to us, it can activate and remind us of deeper losses that we have experienced. And so whether, I know I have a lot of parts who've had trauma around sudden loss of people where they were seemed fully alive and here one day and gone the next. And it's so difficult for my system, a lot of my parts to process that aspect of how can someone be here and then gone, right? And so I encourage you to just turn toward whatever parts are coming up for you. And I have a part wanting to say something, and another part is saying don't bypass the pain and all of that. And I definitely don't want to do that. But I also want to tell you that after I met with all of my parts, I had this peaceful, clear, delightful knowing that Ralph and Derek were the words that came were frolicking and yucking it up together. And I strongly believe that we are not gone after our physical bodies give up, that there is a consciousness, an essence of us that continues on. I absolutely believe near-death experiences that are so consistent about what happens on the other side, and that we are just join the ocean of unconditional love at that point. And it's just, this knowing that you're unconditionally loved, you cannot get it wrong. There's nothing to fear. And so there is a deep comfort in that while also holding the very real pain of the loss of this person in the physical realm. And as far as Ralph is concerned, Ralph absolutely continues to live on through the beautiful work that they have left in this world. And so I'm going to continue through Ralph's book. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give you some of the highlights from the beginning of chapter 10. And in the next video that'll come out on Sunday, I will actually lead you through the beautiful meditation at the end of chapter 10. So, one thing before I start this, so if you're watching this, it'll probably be on Thursday, May 21st, if you're watching it when it comes out. And on Friday, May 23rd, I'm actually having a kind of pop-up group session that I'm calling How to Tap into Your Own Self Energy. And I had this scheduled before any of the news about Ralph, but I want to dedicate it to Ralph because it really is through this book, through Ralph's story, through the exercises that Ralph puts here about interrelating, that has kind of developed this like resurgence of energy in me around helping people and encouraging people to tap into the self energy inside of them and to not feel like they have to be dependent. Yes, another person can absolutely be a beautiful surrogate of self energy for us until we can access our own self energy. But there are many wonderful ways that we can access our self energy, even as our protectors are really big, because we need to be able to have that seed of self energy with which to give a little bit to the protectors so they can begin to relax and make more room for self, as Dick Schwartz says, the virtuous cycle that begins to happen so that there can be what Dick calls the constraint release model, where as the parts begin to rest back, the self naturally emerges, right? And so just feeling so inspired by Ralph and by my own experience to share with people what that looks like. So if you want to join us on this Friday, I'll try to put the link in the description. If for some reason I forget to do that, go to my posts. The last post has the link in it on YouTube, and also it's on the first link in my bio on Instagram. But if you want to join us, you can do that. It's $5. I tried to make it as low as possible so that there was a paywall. Okay, so chapter 10 of Outshining Trauma by Ralph De La Rosa. So I love at the beginning, Ralph tells this story of basically asking Richard Schwartz, the founder of IFS himself, to kind of mentor Ralph. And to his delight and surprise, Dick Schwartz agreed. And then he has this paragraph where he says, I love this. He says, over the months, it struck me that Dick's answers to my questions were often pretty textbook. His advice for most issues I brought to him: apply the rudimentary steps of parts work. I'd ask him what to do with a client with a complex problem I felt stuck on, and he would say, well, help them identify the part of them, step back from it, and help them get into a space of curiosity with it. Once they're there, ... And I'd ask him how to work with parts holding internalized racism or homophobia. And he would say, well, first help the client identify the parts involved, step back from them, find curiosity, ... So much of the time, the guidance I received was some variation on the 6 Fs, and yet the outcomes I saw in people were no less profound for it. So I love this because, again, my experience so resonates with Ralph's here. I answer a lot of questions, and it's funny because I never feel nervous, like I'm not going to be able to answer their questions because the model of IFS is always sufficient for every single question. It's always about interrelating, about finding the part, fleshing it out, checking how we feel toward it, finding curiosity toward it, and then befriending it, assessing for its fears. And it doesn't really matter what kind of part it is, what the issue is. It's always the same process. So it's always the same process, but it's always different. It's both at the same time. It's the same path, the same process, but our experiences and our parts are so incredibly unique that the details of the path and where it takes us and the answers our parts give are always so different and so fascinating. But the path is fairly simple, at least to my system. And so I love that. I love that he noticed that with Dick. I have people come to me, just recently, someone was asking me in my DMs about an issue that they were having with parts around money, and that they had identified this part and that part and this part. And there was just kind of like this polarization or different parts pulling in different directions. And they were asking my advice. And I was like, well, bring all the parts to a space, go one by one, ask them each, check for your self energy toward each one, make sure you're not blended with the other ones, and ask them, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this? And go through, maybe ask them what percentage is not of their burden is not theirs, might be a cultural or legacy burden, and things like that. And they said, man, I should have known that you would just give me the basics of IFS. Yeah, I mean that's how it is. Okay. Um, so the next thing that Ralph talks about on page 121 that I like is, you know, in the past videos, Ralph has this thing that he calls the fivefold foundation. And it is uh posture, abdominal breathing, and then natural breathing, knowing the body in space, and heart breathing. And whenever he leads meditations, he always starts with these five things, and they can be pretty quick. He can get through them in a minute or 2 minutes. And I like that what he calls them is an accelerant to mind body awareness. And he explains, because people will say, well, in IFS, can't we just jump in and start talking to the parts? And yes, you can, but it really is important that we're approaching the parts from self energy. And well, I was going to say he doesn't say this, but they don't say this, but they do say this actually, because Ralph talks a lot about creating safety, right? Externally, in the body, inside, and how foundational that is to being able to be in self and relate to the parts. So this fivefold foundation is really about creating safety in the body, finding that little seed of surrogate self energy in the breath, like the last meditation we did, the consistency of the breath, the support of the breath, the just the nurturing of the breath, right? And the posture of the self, like assuming kind of the posture of the self, and then noticing where you are in space so that you can know your system can be updated, that you're not in the past, you're here now and you're safe, right? And then being able to begin breathing from the heart really begins to connect us to our own self energy. And so we're starting the process with an accelerant for some foundation of self energy, so that then our IFS parts work uh, is coming, it's more efficient, right? Than just trying to come in and essentially having a part to part interaction rather than a self to part interaction. Because when we have a part to part interaction, there's often a lot of turmoil, our system gets more activated, more worked up, and there's not a lot of solutions. There's a lot of fighting and confusion and stuckness and pulling inside. But when we're coming from just even a little bit of self energy toward the parts, the healing work is absolutely accelerated. It's so much more efficient. Uh, it's going to bring peace to our system, clarity to our system, as we support the calm uh, part of self energy. And then that begins to support a little bit of clarity. And then we're able to feel more curious, which brings more clarity. And then we're able to feel compassion, right? And so it's like this inroad into self so that we make sure that we're having that interrelation between self and parts. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to share in this video, I really love, and again, it's before he does this parts work meditation, and he gives, how many are there? 5 important caveats, as he says, as they say. Sorry, I'm going to have to get used to saying they, so please forgive me. Um, my intention is good. So, so the first caveat is there is nuance to the technique of parts work that I am about to offer you, not because it's esoteric or advanced, but because of the abundance of if-then propositions. For example, if you have compassion for a part, then do this. If not, then this. So Ralph says, keep an eye out for these crucial forks in the road. There's a beautiful illustration, I think it's in Jean Catanzaro's book, about unburdened eating. And it's like kind of this diagram, you've seen like these flow charts, right? If this, then this. If this, then this, right? And then you come down, but it's basically about the 6 Fs and how you would maneuver the 6 Fs. And, identifying if you're in self energy, then proceed. If not, try this. Okay, now if you're in self energy, proceed. If not, you might want to get support from another person's self or find some kind of, or a different time when you feel more self energy, right? But there's a lot of if thens, especially checking for self energy and, the answers that your parts give you. Okay, the second caveat is that meditation is a shaky affair, especially for post-pandemic brains that are hooked on attention span decimating smartphones and social media. So Ralph says, forgive yourself in advance for spacing out or being wobbly. So long as you come right back once you notice you're in outer space, it is just fine. Yeah, give yourself grace. You cannot get it wrong. Number 3, the third caveat, Ralph says, is if you are kind to whatever you meet in this experience, you cannot go wrong. There is no wasted effort in the process of becoming self-aware if basic kindness is present. Another way of saying this is that if you have even a tiny bit of self-energy, of and the kindness might even be a self-like part. It might be a part that's trying to help you be kind, because you should be kind, but that can even be supportive and self-sufficient, because not self-sufficient, it can be sufficient, because if the parts feel genuine kindness, they're more likely to relax and to indulge and relate and give more information. And so I love this caveat that if you approach parts with kindness, you genuinely cannot get it wrong. Okay, the fourth caveat, and perhaps most important, says Ralph, is go slowly and pick light burdens to begin with so that you can build these skills and interrelationships before going to anything deep. Your list making and cognitive manager parts or mild irritations are generally wise places to start. So when you're looking for parts to start doing parts work with, you don't want to necessarily start with the biggest. You can potentially do that if you're working with a good therapist who's in self energy. it can be helpful to unburden really, really burdened parts. But even then, I would say it's really important to start because your system may not necessarily trust the therapist self either. And just like with another person in front of you, you have to gain trust in that person in order to um, be more exposed or give more information. So be more vulnerable, right? So if it's the same way with your parts and yourself, your the self needs to gain trust. So the parts might give like little pieces of truth and information and authenticity to see how the self handles it. And then when they gain evidence that the self handles it well, they trust more and more and can give more and more. So it's a gradually increasing process. Okay. Number 5. Finally, this is not a goal-driven work. That's true. You are not a project, and your healing is not a to-do list to complete in some linear fashion. Trauma-focused healing work is circular and exploratory in nature. I love this. There's no agenda, there's no you've arrived at some point. It's not linear. It is circular and exploratory in nature. As long as we live, we will get to explore and relate inside. And it is that relationship that creates health and healthy choice in us. It says that it evolves most efficiently when we are willing to surrender to getting to know our parts rather than trying to fix them. Yes, so it's other parts, usually managers, that are trying to fix, these other parts that are extreme that the managers think are causing problems. But the energy of the self is really just about relating and getting to know and learn more about the parts without judgment, without agenda, without trying to fix them, just connecting to them. It evolves most efficiently when we're willing to surrender to getting to know our parts rather than to fix them. Parts tend to be much more, oh, okay, I like this. Ralph says parts tend to be much more like cats than dogs, especially at first. Rather than excitedly leaping on us as we walk in the door, parts often hang back until they know we are well-intentioned and trustworthy. Similarly, if one walks right up to a cat and attempts to pick them up, it's likely not going to end well. We approach parts with this kind of energy, especially exiles, and they are likely to run and hide. Just as with cats, parts are far more likely to come around when a calm and patient presence allows them to approach on their own timeline. So I agree. But I would also say that there are different parts. There are some parts and even some exiles who are so desperate for attention that anyone who begins to give a little bit of attention or interest, they will just attach and gravitate. Like that is their strategy or their burden is attach, attach. And so some parts, even from the beginning, are like dogs. But a lot of parts are like cats. We just have to get to know that each unique part and see how they are. But a lot of parts are like cats where they are skeptical, they are holding back, they are not going to share with you if you are blended with a part that doesn't like them or wants to change them or is afraid of them, judges them in any way, right? So they really need to know that you are in self energy and that you genuinely just want to get to know them, that you believe the best about them, all of that kind of thing. And then they warm up to you, right? And then there can also be this experience where several parts begin to get in some uh, experience with the self, where the self is showing up very genuinely, is trustworthy, is loving and kind. And then all the parts begin to rush the gate, is what I would say. So I've talked to a lot of people where they have this experience. Their system won't open up, but then they begin to gain trust in the self. And once it's like this tipping point. And now the system trusts the self, and all the parts want to be seen and heard, and that can feel really overwhelming to the system as well. But again, if you just have a calm patience about it, that you don't have to get everything done in one sitting, in one day. You have the rest of your life, perhaps beyond that, to get to know your parts, to love on them, to listen to them. And so you might just check in with your system and see how much time they're willing to spend today and make appointments with other parts for other days and just really, really listen. Again, if there are parts that feel really impatient or overwhelmed about it, you can ask them if they'll give you space so that the core of you that does not feel impatient or urgent, I can emerge just to be with parts and listen to them. All right. So, I just really appreciated all of those caveats. And I don't know if I'll review them or not the next time, but in the next video, I'm going to actually do the parts work meditation. I wanted to say two other things real quick. Um, so Ralph I was going to say does and then did, but did have a YouTube channel. And so I do encourage you to go to Ralph's YouTube channel as well and check out their videos, check out their guided meditations. They were an especially gifted IFS meditation teacher. And so I'm not trying to, use Ralph's meditations in place of you being led by Ralph themselves. So go ahead and please do that. And the last thing I'll say is I got to remember to put all these links in the description, but I want to put a link in the description in case you feel called. There is a GoFundMe for Ralph's mother to help her with expenses and travel and various things. And so I want to put that link in the description as well. And if you would like to give to that, I encourage you to do that. Um, okay, so I'll see you next time and lead you through that beautiful meditation. If you have any comments or any questions about anything that I've shared in this video, please leave them in the comment section. And I'm trying to think of an emoji that you could share in the comments. Um, I would say anything that has to do with light, because yeah, I just am feeling Ralph's light through their book, um, through just the knowing that Ralph is one with the ultimate light and love now. So you can do anything, I guess, that represents light or love. Hearts are easy. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for being with me.